Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and for today's video, we're going to be talking about Zom 100 Bucket List of the Dead, a live-action version, which started streaming on Netflix recently. Now, the anime has been released like a couple of weeks before the live-action movie started streaming on the platform, which I think is a good way to kind of like hype up this story. But then at the same time, like, I think streaming platforms has been doing this a lot lately, where they put up like the original source material whenever a live action film comes up, so that people can get a grasp of what the story first and then look forward to the live action version. And speaking of live action, so for the original source material for this one of the creators is Haro Aso, who is also the creator of the Alice in Borderland manga. So Alice in Borderland, in case you know, is another Netflix hit, the live action version. So just putting out those facts before I start talking about the movie itself. Another thing that I want to point out is I've seen 2 episodes of the anime, but then I stopped there because I really wanted to watch the live action film with like as a standalone, like how I would perceive it, as with like other things that I reviewed here on my channel that has a manga and anime adaptations that went before it, or as reference materials. But for the intended purposes of some elements or some commentary that I have about the film, I might reference some parts of the anime that I've seen, but not necessarily like as a huge comparison saying this one is better over that. It's really more of just the elements of it that take part in why my commentary turned out that way, if that makes sense. Another thing that I also want to share before I start completely talking about this is I'm not exactly the biggest fan of the zombie genre, but films I can totally tolerate. Like, I've seen Train to Busan, definitely enjoyed that one because it's fast-paced, a lot of adrenaline. I saw I Am a Hero a couple of years back, and I thought that it's a unique take on a zombie narrative, considering that it has that excitement element to it, but it's still quintessentially Japanese at the end of the day, where the main character is kind of like finding himself. It's a self journey kind of thing, which I appreciated and I enjoy that. But the zombie genre in TV shows, not exactly the huge fan of. I find them just generally boring, no matter like how much my family actually enjoys a lot of like the zombie genre TV shows, just not for me. And yes, I'm really thankful that they made this into like a film as compared to like a limited series, because I feel like I would just find it so boring if it became a series. So yeah, like with that said, so let's just get to it. The story is about Tendo Akira, played by Akaso Eiji, and he was a very enthusiastic newbie in this company. He was really happy because it was in an industry that he was really wanted, and he was just really happy, enthusiastic, as with any other newbie in the corporate system. Like, he was really excited about this. But it wasn't until like later that he discovered that these are it's a black company that he's working for, which is an umbrella term for companies that tend to be very exploitative, that leave their employees working long, exhaustive hours, usually with no extra pay, but because of the company culture, and at the same time with the Japanese work culture, where it's usually disrespectful for someone to kind of like excuse themselves early into work before their seniors or their bosses, or to say no to doing all these different tasks, even if it seems impossible. So he finds himself exhausted and at his wits' end, even just within a year working into this company, but he couldn't really say anything because, again, he also keeps gaslighting himself into saying that this is something that he wants, that the company culture is good, that all the negative things that is like that's happening to him is part of this like culture that he simply has to embed himself in and to just accept, because that's just how things are. And one like the highlight of him working there is just one particular person, which is him crushing on one of his seniors who's also working in the same floor, and that's basically it. Like something that uplifts him is having a crush on this particular other person. And yeah, but other than that, he's super exhausted, super tired, until one day, when he was about to pay his bike parking rental to his landlord, he discovers that his landlord turned into a zombie. And from there, it strikes him that the entire apartment complex is swarming with zombies, and he starts running away. And the first thing that he thinks of is he's gonna be late for work. It wasn't until he realized that the world is probably ending because of the zombie apocalypse that he doesn't have to clock in for work anymore, because there's technically an apocalypse happening. And that's basically the starting point of like what the movie is going to be about, or what the story is going to be about. It's a realization that work has definitely taken so much of himself that it took an apocalypse for him to be finally free from that. And because of that, he started living his life a little bit more optimistically. He started creating this bucket list of things that he wanted to do, now that he's able to do so, because he doesn't have to work anymore. And at first, it was really fun. He started like doing like barbecuing and then drinking beer in the middle of the day, and just doing all these kinds of like fun things that he wasn't able to enjoy back then. And it wasn't until he wanted to reconnect with his best friend, who he fought like in earlier on into the story, he fought with, that made him want to like seek out and call his friend and want to reconcile with him. The friend is played by Yanagi Shuntaro, who people who've seen Alice in Borderland would probably recognize him more as Last Boss. He plays Kencho, or his real name is Kenichiro, but in the narrative, as a pet name, Akira calls him Kencho, so I'll refer to him as Kencho as well. And they kind of like reunite, and they're this duo who kind of like just enjoy the situation as it is. And they started, like Kencho also started playing along with Akira, wanting to fulfill the things in his bucket list, but he kind of also calls him out for just listing just a couple of things, when he said that he wants to do 100 things if ever, before he becomes a zombie, if ever he becomes a zombie. But then there's also like just a short list, and Kencho is like, you have to add more things, and they started doing that. And then another person who kind of like joins this combination that they have is Shizuka, played by Shiraishi Mai. Now Shizuka, she's the type of girl who Akira met earlier on into the story, but she's the type who values her own survival, who feels like she could survive best alone, and that she couldn't understand people who would sacrifice themselves to save other people, which is very similar to how she initially met Akira. So she was pretty skeptical meeting him again, as well as with Kencho. But because of certain circumstances, they eventually had to travel together, because they heard that there was a sanctuary in Ibaraki, which is kind of like a road trip away from where they're situated in Tokyo. And that sanctuary supposedly had a number of survivors in them as well. So they wanted to head there and to see, how things are, if it's possible that they can survive in that facility as well. But throughout their journey, they eventually developed a really nice friendship. Like the three of them, they started having fun, filling in, stuff in Akira's bucket list, and just doing all these things. And when they get to the facility, find out that that Akira's old boss was the one who was running the facility. And so it started triggering a lot of like his PTSD, back to being in that slave mode again, in that boss, and just following his orders here and there. And he's just back to, like that state of being a zombified employee yet again. Then a lot of crazy things happen, but then eventually the movie ends with the three of them escaping that place and eventually venturing out into the world with both Shizuka and Kensho also adding things that they want to do in the bucket list. Like, that's basically the premise of the film. Now, with that said, so the general idea of the film, I absolutely love it. I think it's a commentary on how, you know, sometimes we get so absorbed with work or other things that we forget who we are as people, and we're no better than zombies because of these kinds of things. And these things are inevitable because that's just how reality is, you know. People can make excuses and say, you know, YOLO, whatever, but in a way, like, society views work as part of life. And sometimes it takes away a huge part of ourselves that we completely have to bury and forget and everything. And it's a nice metaphor for it to remind us to start living again, etc., etc. But again, most of it has that wishful thinking vibe to it as well. That's why I think it was so effective, you know, catching people's attention with the main angle of the movie, where, you know, you have a main character who's so exhausted, who doesn't want to go to work anymore, and finally gets his moment through an apocalypse. I think that's like the main catch of it, is seeing that, and you can immediately say, oh, relatable. The main issue that I have with how the live action film turned out would be cinematography. And like, there's just so much that could have added to the experience of what the film could have felt like even more. Because overall, like, there's a sense of ridiculousness to the plot. In a way that, you know, there's zombies crawling everywhere, and then you have this guy just riding his bike very, very happily, merrily, all these things, and you kind of like get that. But because the narrative stuck to a more realistic cinematography, like, nothing about the colors or the score or anything like that up the ante when it comes to making the audience visually feel what Akira is feeling. It felt like there was something lacking there in terms of just pushing, you know, like the point of it, which is kind of frustrating for me, because in the poster it was bursting in color and everything like that, which is a reference to the anime, and how, like, when Akira realizes that he doesn't have to report to work anymore, his world suddenly started bursting in color. And I feel like that's so easy to translate in cinematography if they don't want to make the film black and white. There's color grading. There's definitely a lot of things that could have changed, like, how you perceive the live action film visually. And I couldn't use other things as an excuse, because I've seen a lot of Japanese films with live action adaptations that was able to really push the exaggeration when it comes to visuals. And so for this one, like, I feel like they could have done that as well to really reinforce, like, how crazy it is for Akira to be experiencing, like, this level of optimism in the middle of an apocalypse. Like, I don't know, even the wardrobe choice, I feel like they could have done something with that. Like, the colors could pop out more as compared to, like, other characters or the zombies. I don't know, there's just something about the cinematography and just the overall feel of the movie that I feel like could have been improved, so that the experience would be a lot more comedic. And another thing is, speaking of comedy, there's something off about the comedic timing of this film. Like, there's some jokes that it was fine, but it just doesn't have that kind of, like, impact when it comes to landing it. Like, there's this one particular part, I wouldn't elaborate as much, but there was this one part where someone was crying over another character because they thought that that other character was injured badly. And then it kind of, like, it's cliche that you know that that character would wake up and stuff like that. anyways. Like, it's such a classic joke already. But when it happened, usually in other shows, it still works because there's a sense of like slapstick comedy in there. But there, it just didn't click, and I was just so frustrated when that happened because there's so many comedic moments in the film that I feel like if just delivered or shaped a lot more differently, it would have been a lot more funny. And another thing is that, yeah, I think more on the technical aspects of it, I feel like camera angles could have also helped. Like, there's this one particular part near the end with Shiraishi Mai's character, and like something like that. Like, zombies were charging at her character for a certain reason, and the shot was filmed a little bit too straightforward or linear, and I feel like a change in angle, like a top view or something like that, would have made that scene a little bit more epic. And I don't know, like, for me, I'm also not that, like, I feel like I'm still not that well versed when it comes to film, but because this is a genre or a narrative that we've seen over and over again, like with, you know, with zombies and then comedy and everything like that, for something to work, elements of cinematography also has to have a huge role in making the story work, you know? And for me, like, the casting is fine. Like, even the main premise of this, it has a lot of potential because, again, it's something that's relatable. It's something that's, you know, like, it's something that, like, that people can easily say, okay, so if a zombie apocalypse happens, so what will I put in my own bucket list? Something like that. Like, it was so easy to ignite that sense of relatability to the audience. It's just that I feel like visually the film didn't deliver as much to reinforce that kind of relatability and message, and also create this entirely entertaining experience. Like, for me, it was fine. It was okay. Like, I enjoyed it, but there's always the sense of there's something lacking about this one. And when I realized that it was the cinematic experience itself that really affected the way that I was viewing it, I was like, that definitely could have easily been remedied with just some color grading, filters, anything. Aside from that, is it worth watching? I'd say yes, definitely. Like, if you're not as picky when it comes to like those elements, I would say, yeah, it's a very relatable narrative. Like, it's not offering anything new to the table. It's just that it's still enjoyable to that extent, I guess. But yeah, but I think, like, if you're very particular with the way of how things are as immersive when it comes to like visually, scoring, other things, so yeah, you might find similar issues the way I did. So yeah, but still, I think it's really fun. I think that but like overall, Akaso Eiji still did a good job in terms of leading the film. Before I end today's video, I also want to point out that another change that they did in from the anime to the live action was, in the anime, he was working Akira was working for the company for 3 years, and then for live action film it's only been 1 year. But I think one of the reasons why it was so significant, why he's so exhausted and why he's so worn out, was because that was happening to him for 3 years, and that was really like the core at the beginning of the story. So that's why he was so, he was so happy when the apocalypse happened and realized that he doesn't have to report for work anymore. For this one, making such a huge change, like in putting like just that short amount of time for this character to feel so like so exhausted about his work. Like, I understand that the kind of like working in a toxic workplace, it doesn't necessarily have to have a specific time frame, but just for the intents and purposes of storytelling, I wish that if they wanted to say it's 1 year, they could have committed to making him look and feel like so tired. I don't know, like they could have done it with makeup. I think some scenes in his apartment, they could have like made it at his apartment is like really dim and grimy looking and stuff like that, very similar to the anime. And I usually don't like comparing anime to live action adaptations. I like to like appreciate them as separate entities. But for this one, I feel like these are some elements that could have easily translated in live action, and I was so disappointed that they didn't just follow it because it was so effective in the storytelling. And yeah, and I feel like if they were gonna shorten like the time frame, they could have at least exaggerated a little bit more as to how it's affecting him as an employee and why it's such a big deal that this apocalypse happened for him. So yeah, so overall, apart from those other details, I feel like, yeah, sure, it's still very entertaining. If you haven't seen like the anime or the manga, I think you can still enjoy the film as it is. But it's not like the adrenaline rush zombie type of narrative. It's definitely more of like a self-discovery, coming of age, if you will, kind of narrative. And as with, you know, like a lot of Japanese movies and dramas as well, like circling around that topic. But yeah. So with that said, so tell me down in the comments below your thoughts on the Zom 100 film. One of my favorite elements from it would be the shark. I wouldn't elaborate, just the shark. And yeah, and with that said, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon in a new one. Bye!